Thank you very much, Paula. Can everybody hear me okay? Excellent, great. I will have your videos off to the side so I can kind of see head nods and whether or not things that I'm showing on the screen are actually appearing. Okay, so let me share my screen really quick. I will remember to also share audio. So we're going to do that and share. And I'm going to open this up over here. Good. Okay. And I should hopefully in the chat, let me know. I will be keeping an eye on that. You can see my slides, correct?
I see him fine.
Perfect. Okay, well, I think we will get started. So welcome, everybody. My name is Steve Kaufman. I'm a senior instructional designer at the University of Akron. If you're not familiar where Akron is, it's about 20 minutes south of Cleveland. So we're about maybe, I guess, then 30 minutes south of the lake, Lake Erie. It is also known as the home of LeBron James. So that's usually the connection that people make. Oh yeah, you guys have Goodyear Tire and LeBron James. Yes, that's the Akron claim to fame here. Today we're going to talk about something that's really near and dear to my heart. I was so excited when Dr. Pollard was doing the keynote because learner equity has been on a lot of our minds lately. If you were in the QM town hall this morning, you may have realized that a hot button issue that we're all thinking about is how can we make sure that our courses are the most equitable in terms of access to content, in terms of access to technology. And this is something that really is something that higher ed really has to adjust to, especially in light of a pandemic. Not all of our students are ready, either academically or technologically, to handle the load and the cognitive load that we're going to place on them. But most certainly, it's also an issue of cost. So I want to talk to you about some strategies today about how we can address the growing cost of higher education and some different opportunities that I think you as course designers, as faculty members, as administrators can use and provide you some resources to help kickstart the conversation, if it isn't already happening, on how to address open pedagogy, open design, and learner equity. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat the entire time, so feel free to ask me questions. I'll pause occasionally and just make sure that everybody's good to go. Also at the bottom of the screen, you're going to see a bit.ly link. All of the resources, I've got a ton of them to share with you today. So I highly encourage you to check that out. We'll do a little collaboration in there. You'll find a document called the Master List of Open Resources. It's like the list. And feel free to take notes publicly in there if you've got something from the presentation that really sparks something in you. I'd love to hear about that, and obviously for you to share that with others. Okay, so of course, being QM, right, as you've seen in many presentations, we have to start with our objectives. So my goal is to help you personalize this. How do we identify individuals on my campus that can help support open education, open design, open pedagogy, right? It's not just solely faculty, it's not just solely instructional designers. And I want to call out a few more people on your campus that you may not have realized have a stake in this game. I want you to contribute ideas to a shared document, which is what we're going to do in Google Drive throughout the presentation, on how best to move forward with OER adoption. If you've got questions in there, certainly I will go in after the fact and answer those questions, or if I don't answer them live for you. And then of course, I want you to look at maybe some ideas for how you can take existing assignments that maybe you, if you're an instructional designer, have always recommended with faculty members of different ways and different strategies to push out assignments online. And maybe there's an opportunity there to use some open pedagogy principles. And we're going to dive into what that actually means here in a little bit. Okay, and thank you very much, Christine, for putting that link in the chat. So kind of piggybacking off of the learning objectives, there are 5 main questions I want to answer for you today. Number 1 is, how do we get the cost of course materials down for our students? It's really, really expensive. And I'm going to share some of the data that I've collected on this because I think it's going to perk up some eyebrows. How do we improve course quality through the use of QM, right? I'm preaching to the choir here. You know how QM can benefit quality assurance, but what might be some of the spin-offs of that when we're talking about open resources? How do we increase retention and persistence? That's something we're all concerned in. We're all in that business. How do we assist with developing distinctive programs? What can you do using open to market your programs to potential learners? And of course, how do we empower faculty and students? And that plays right into open pedagogy. So let's frame it out here. There's a problem in higher education. I call it the reckoning. Okay, and the reckoning is this: the amount of funding that higher education has received over the last 20, 30 years has obviously been decreasing, depending on what state you're in. Most of the time it's trending downward. State funding has kind of been kind of ho-hum, but the cost of education has been increasing, and so that burden, that tuition burden on the student, continues to trickle up and up and up as we all compete for the same learners, right? In my state, I've got some resources to share where you have data of all 50 states, and I can have you pull the slide and you can see where your state is. But in my state of Ohio, this model flipped back in right when I was entering grad school, back in like 2005, 2006, where I went to Bowling Green State University, and I could see that state funding now was decreasing, and now the burden upon me as the learner, right, paying my way through college, was now flipped, and a majority of the burden was up on me and my family. And so that's really interesting. I think there's only one or two states where that is not the model. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but most of your graphs look like this, but the year might shift. And so there's something that we have to do to address this issue. I always used to joke that we should call it Bowling Green State Assisted University because it was majorly on me, right? So there's a relationship here. We know that student success is a heavy lift, especially with online learning. And of course, the cost of materials is a tough boulder to push up that hill, right? Sisyphus trying to push this thing up the hill. And what makes this even more difficult is that I think the cost of textbooks has increased something like 1,600% in the last 30 years. CPI is the consumer price index. That's basically essentially like credit card debt across. And you can see how that slowly trickles up, but 3 times higher than CPI is where the increase is of textbook prices. We know this. On your campus, you might have a faculty member that's using a $300 textbook. I know I do on my campus. And I, of course, ask them, how many of your students purchased that book? Not a lot of them, maybe a third that we typically find. I'm curious, just in the chat, for courses that you either have developed or have helped design, put some of the textbook prices. I'm just curious, just kind of do an informal poll here in the chat. What is probably the most expensive book that you know of on your particular campus? And I will continue on as you're filling out some information here. Okay, so we know actually it's 1,041% since 1971, and it's outpaced the cost of healthcare and housing, which is crazy. And you think in light of COVID that the cost of healthcare is dramatically increasing, cost of food. But yeah, it's crazy. I'm looking at the chat right now. Shannon says $461. Wow, that's an expensive book. 350-ish. Yeah, I have a lot of engineering, biology, physics majors where they buy like the giant encyclopedia text or calculus textbooks on my campus. They're 320, north of 350 sometimes. Students, trust me, they absolutely love paying $300 to get access to a little code that they can't keep forever after they graduate, for an online access code for publisher resources. That's painful, right? If you can't build your own library of resources. And Ebony's saying medical coding texts run $200 each. Yeah, but you need it, right? If you're going to be in medical coding, you need the reference. There's not really any way around it. So I want you to think about this. The cost barrier has kept 2.4 million. This is a US Department of Education study from a few years ago. 2.4 million low and moderate income college qualified high school graduates from completing college in the previous decade. Now, I'm sitting here for a second because I really want this one to sink home, because I feel like at my institution where we have enrollment issues, I think if we could grab any piece of that 2.4 million, that would dramatically help. With budgets, and certainly be able to increase our student population on campus or even online that's really been decimated through many years of all of our universities in Ohio competing for the same set of students. Kent State is 20 minutes down the road from us, and we serve 2 very different populations of student. So it's hard with so much competition. I understand, and I feel that stress, certainly like all of you do. So what does the research show if we dig into it? If you look up on the College Board website, typically students are told to budget somewhere between $1,200 and $1,400 for books and supplies each year. And if you go to your website on your university, it's actually a federal requirement. Just Google the name of your university and cost of attendance. And it has to be listed, like how much should it cost, when you buy all the supplies. At my university, it's about $1,000, I think. And it hasn't changed for the last however long I've been there, maybe 10 years. But what we actually see is that students are spending more like $415 a year. So I want to ask the question in the chat, why do you think that there's a difference here? We tell students to budget between $1,200 and $1,400, but they're only spending about $415 a year. Why might that be? Let me look at the chat here. What do you guys think? Purchasing on Amazon, absolutely, Eddie. They don't buy the books at all, right? They don't buy all the books. Students not buying. Options for getting textbooks have increased. You know, buying them, I can't afford it. Borrow from a friend, renting books, borrowing from friends. Absolutely, right? Students are smart about their money usually, right? And so they understand the game of higher education. Maybe they've been burned in the past by the faculty member that didn't use the textbook. And often what we find is that first semester freshmen, they do buy all the required books, but then they learn their lesson and they don't in following semesters. So that's really interesting here. And I think you've all hit the nail right on the head there, that they've got a lot of different options here. So I'll share a little bit about what textbook prices are on my campus specifically a little bit later. Let's keep going. So Florida Virtual puts out a survey every couple of years. I think the 2020 results hopefully will be coming out here, usually in the early part of summer. This is a survey of 22,000 students. Okay, and you can see how the trend has moved a little bit over time, right? Obviously, with the adoption of OER, kind of en masse across campus, things like OpenStax affect these numbers. But they ask students the question: in your academic career, has the cost of textbooks caused you to not purchase the required textbook? 64%. Say solely based on cost, I just could not buy the required text for class. 42% reported taking fewer classes. 40% didn't register for a specific course. 35% earn a poor grade. 22% dropped a course. And as of 2016, almost 20% failed the course because they didn't have the materials they needed to be successful, which is really surprising, right? When it comes to not registering for a specific course, here's the honest truth. I have students that have told me that I look up on the bookstore website all of the different sections of humanities in the Western tradition. I stack up all the different faculty members, and they're not going off of the reputation of the faculty member. They're going off of which course is the least expensive to take, right? So think about that. Not all faculty use the same textbook within a department or for a particular course. If that isn't standardized, you'd have a lot of variability, and guess which section fills up first? The one that maybe used OER, maybe the one that has a nominal textbook cost of $50 or less, as opposed to the $200, even though that faculty member might be the senior faculty member in the department, the tenure track full professor with deep content knowledge, that might not even come into play when it comes to how a student actually selects that particular section to take. So I find that really surprising, right? Now, when it comes to coping with cost, I think you all hit it, right? Students will purchase the older edition of the textbook, which is sometimes a risk because maybe the content is really updated. And if they purchase an old edition, even if it wasn't recommended by the faculty member, they might be missing assignments, or certainly the page numbers won't line up with what they're being assigned in the class. They'll delay purchasing the textbook. On my campus, a lot of our students say that they wait 3 weeks before they purchase the textbook because the financial aid checks don't get issued until 3 weeks into the semester. So there's that divide, that extra challenge of I don't have the money in hand to be able to go out and get these things. A lot of students never purchase the book at all. They share the textbook with other students, which is hard when you're trying to study for midterms or finals and you're the third person waiting for that shared textbook, right? And of course, they download textbooks from the internet. And I've kind of set that one apart because ideally, we don't want students to do that. I mean, certainly you could go to Google and you could type in, McConnell macroeconomics, and it will bring up a PDF, hopefully, and you could maybe read it, but that's illegal, right? That's an illegal copy, and we don't want to ever promote that with our learners. But obviously, it's up to them what they do. And of course, we don't want to endorse policies that would get our institutions in trouble. So we want to stay away from that one. Amanda is saying also harder to do with COVID, not being able to be in spaces with others. Absolutely. How do you share when you're not physically together? Do I have to disinfect with a Lysol can before the book? Do I have to wear gloves and a mask? There's a lot of extra stress that gets hyped up on this. You're absolutely right. Okay, and here's another also surprising statistic. It was a study on first generation college students. So this is graduation rate within 8 years. And we've seen this, I've seen this in multiple presentations throughout QM Connect, whereas first generation students have a 26% graduation rate within 8 years. You're already facing this challenge of you not having a support network behind you that can pass down that book to you or being able to give you advice about how to navigate this thing called college. Second and third generation students have a much higher graduation rate within 8 years, almost 70%. So the point I want to make here is that there are groups of students that are not succeeding. And I think Dr. Pollard hit this right on the head, is that these issues have always been there. COVID has just brought an even brighter light onto the situation. So I got curious. I went to my student union. This is pre-COVID, so don't yell at me if you don't see masks on any of these students or myself. Pre-COVID, I walked around my student union and all I did was hold up a sign that says, "What do you think about the cost of college textbooks?" This was a risk because the bookstore is also in my student union, but I think the thing to note here is that the students were very, very opinionated, and I want to share this with you. Let me know in the chat if you can hear it.
Yeah, I actually was, because like I went downstairs to the bookstore and I was like, because we have like these codes for each book, so I was looking at each of the codes and I'm like, 200, like $300, like, and then all of the books that I had to use were actually like, all the used books were already gone, so like I would have to buy them new. So I was really surprised about that I would be spending like up to $600 on books.
A lot more expensive than I anticipated them being. I did go to college while I was in high school and did the college credit plus thing. So my high school covered the cost of those textbooks. So when I had to start paying for them myself, I was kind of not excited about the price.
Even though I had heard about the textbooks being so expensive, I didn't expect them to be as expensive as they actually were.
I thought they'd be a little less pricey, and actually my major textbooks are less than my gen ed textbooks.
I didn't think they would be that expensive.
A little bit, yeah, especially because when you're in high school, like, you don't pay for your textbooks. So when you see that number of tuition, you're like, oh, this is what I'm gonna have to pay. And then you come here and it's like, well, actually you have to pay like $500 more every semester. So it was a little shocking, yeah, for sure.
I usually wait till after the first week because half the time the professors don't even use the textbook, or you only have to buy the textbook so you can get an online access code.
I always used to, and then I had some conflicts. Every time I would go to the class, the professor would change it, so I would have to send the book back, reorder it. So this semester I just waited until classes started, and then I went to go purchase the book.
A lot of my friends have told me to just wait after the first week of classes to see if you actually need them, so I think I'm going to start doing that.
300?
Around 325, I think, for like something like, it was like a calculus book, but it had all three, like Calc 1, 2, and 3 in it, but it was just a big fat book.
Last semester, I think I spent close to $600 on my textbooks.
I believe it was $200 or $215.
It's in the realm of like $220.
$800.
200. I like to repress those memories.
Probably $150.
Probably almost $200 total.
The books are expensive, and being a college student, you know, we're already thousands of dollars in debt, and you don't really want to add to that. So even though you have to take the courses required for your major, it makes it hard because you don't have the book, and then you might not have time to go to the library. You know, you might not have a friend in the class whose book you can use, so it's kind of hard.
Yeah, because if it's too expensive to buy and it's a necessity, then like, I'm not going to drop out, but it's going to be a lot harder. Like, I'm going to have to mooch off my friends, like borrow their books until I can like afford the book.
Yeah, kind of, because some of the classes that I take require books that are specifically for this university. So I would have to go downstairs and buy it, and like most of the books down there are close to $200. So it kind of makes it difficult. Like, what do you want to buy and what don't you want to buy, you know? But you kind of have to if it's required, so.
I haven't come to a class where I've actually needed the textbook for the class, so as of yet, no.
Yeah, it has, because one time I tried to wait on a book and I couldn't afford it, but there was assignments in the book, so it was kind of hard to try to like find a way around it to try to get it done.
I'm curious, in the chat, did anything that the students said in that video really jump out to them? I'll note one thing that jumped out to me. One of our students said that my major's textbooks were less expensive than my general education textbooks. Crazy, right? Yeah, and Kristen said $800. That I think that one student was saying how much they'd spend in one semester. Yeah, I don't think we have any $800 textbooks. That would be atrocious. Yep, and Vicky's mentioning we have all heard this before. Our libraries put textbooks on reserve, but there's only one for each course, right? A lot of instructors will lend their evaluation copy to the students as well. Students are encouraging each other to wait and buy the textbooks. Yeah, Cynthia, you're absolutely right that you see the cost of some textbooks are coming down and student fees are increasing, and that's because of inclusive access. It's almost like a gotcha. You take the class and the publisher gives you a discount on the content, but the student really doesn't have an option to not pay for the book unless they opt out completely, which we've made incredibly difficult sometimes with some of these publishers. So other things I wanted to note, thank you very much everyone for sharing. But something I want to note here is that there's obviously a lot of things that play into what students have to spend their money on. And really what it comes down to is it's a value judgment, right? Think about how food insecurity has become a major issue, especially during a pandemic. I have some offices on our campus that have just like a little food bank pantry for the majors, and they have ramen stock there and soup cans and all these different things, and it's constantly having students come through and grab something. I saw this article come through my university press the other day, yesterday. Look at this date, October 26th. Colleges fight hunger, fill basic needs to keep students in school. I mean, 10 years ago, there were just a handful of university food bank programs. Now there's well over 500. So there's a lot of things weighing on the students. At no point did the students say in that video, these textbooks are worthless. They understand the value, but they also understand that maybe rent comes first. Maybe feeding myself comes first. So what can we do? This is a question I pose to faculty. Does anybody here affect tuition at your institution? Probably not, right? Where's the one place where we can start to have a conversation that we think might have a big impact on our learners? Books and supplies, right? And as instructional designer, I don't pick the book, right? I don't pick the supplies that are necessary for the course, but being knowledgeable about the topic allows me to help point them in the right direction. And that's what we're going to talk about for the rest of the presentation. So I mentioned earlier that I'm going to talk about what an actual semester at my campus looks like. And here's the chart. I just took a non-declared major, and here's just 5 classes you take, right? Your intro to geography, ethics, psych, a history class, a foreign language class. And we tell our students to budget for the full academic year, $1,000 for course materials. If I went the new route, I already spent $841. If I delayed my purchase decision, I might not have a used copy available. I'm at $732. If I partner with my library, I can at least bring some of that cost down, right? And of course, inclusive access will range based on the publisher. But the point is, we tell them $1,000 for a full year, and this is one semester, 5 classes. And that perks up eyebrows when I share with my faculty. I ask my faculty all the time, how much is your textbook? A lot of them don't know, because it's a decision that's handled by the department. The department's administrative assistant hands out a seat sheet that says, are you just going to use the same textbook that you had last year? And there you go. It's just kind of rinse and repeat, and the price is slowly inflating behind the scenes. So that is certainly something that perks up my faculty's eyebrows. And I encourage you to do some research on at your institution to see what those actual costs are. So who's responsible for this? Is it the bookstore's fault because there's markup? Well, not necessarily. Is it the publisher's fault? Well, they have to recoup their costs. So I understand some of these textbooks cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to produce. So I get it. Is it administration or faculty fault, instructional designers, librarians? The point is, we all own this. We all have a duty and a role to serve on our campus to help address and make sure that students have a more equitable environment. And that's something that I'm really passionate about, and I'm going to give you some additional resources on how to answer this question on your campus. So incomes quality matters, right? Another thing that I'm very concerned with when it comes to quality assurance at my campus. And it's a delicate conversation, right? I mean, I get it. You might have a really good ground game on your campus, but you might be just getting started. So as soon as I have a workshop and I say, let's talk about measurable objectives and alignment, some eyebrows are like, okay, number one, maybe what's alignment? But number two, what do you mean my objectives aren't measurable? To have knowledge and to understand is totally measurable, except it isn't. It's very, very hard to assess something that's in someone's head. So I understand that faculty might be coming to you as a designer, perhaps, or in a support position with a lot of preconceived notions about what they've heard about QM. And part of our role being the QM flag wavers is to dispel some of those rumors. And we certainly know that there's a balance between design and delivery. And the beauty of Quality Matters is that we're 100% focused on design, but fully acknowledging that You know, we can talk about design all day, but it's a fine line, right? When we walk and discuss delivery. I'm sure I found this GIF online and I just thought it was great, so I'm just including it here. Enjoy. I cringe every time I see it. And we talk about the online quality pie, right? That design is just one aspect of the pie, and there's so much else that goes into the materials and the delivery style and the engagement and all of those different things. And Miriam is saying, and there's so much in design that influence our delivery. Absolutely right. I'm sure you've had faculty on your campus that have said, going through QM has made me a better face-to-face instructor. I totally feel that way. Just going through QM training has made my ability to give really great feedback just to colleagues or just to faculty in a non-peer review course review sense. It just made me a lot more aware of how I'm coming across when it comes to giving feedback. So if that's just the unintended benefit, so much the better, right? So part of this is knowing your ecosystem. Who can you reach out to on your campus to help you with this theory that we want to redesign our courses to ensure a high level of quality assurance and maybe possibly look at open resources? I charted it out the other day at my university. So we have our library, right? So I got my little Venn diagram here, and they manage collections, they subscribe to databases, things that they already pay for. And guess what? At most of our institutions, library resources are way underutilized. Librarians are like banging on the doors, like, please use my resources. I can do more than tell your students how to use the database. I can go through and teach them about information literacy. I can show them where to find the actual great resources and how to do really great in-depth research with resources that won't cost you a thing. And of course, there's also the open world, right? We know about all of these different things like OpenStax, Open Textbook Network, the Open Ed Collaborative. We know about BC Open Campus. We know about all these things. And that certainly has a play. We have affordable. The bookstore has a piece of this. We have things that are much less expensive for our students to have, or maybe for a nominal fee that your library can purchase. There might be an opportunity to include a textbook in the list of ebooks that your library currently has access to and give the students unlimited access to those things. We've been doing that a lot at my institution, and it's just completely eliminated the textbook burden upon the students themselves. So what we do is we have this thing called our Affordable Learning Initiative, and that's where we sit in the middle. My department is Design and Development Services. That's where the designers sit. Print on demand is a function of our student union, and then we also have a publishing arm as a part of our library for faculty publications and student publications. So my stake in the game here, my goals as a designer are to help faculty create a great online course that they feel proud of, right? That everybody wants to have a great, first exposure to online for their learners. I don't know anyone on the call that would say, I'm not concerned about student success, right? That's the business that we're in. We want to implement a process for quality assurance, whatever that might be. At my campus, it's Quality Matters, and you're at the QM Connect conference, it's QM on your campus too, most likely. And I have to do everything I can to help ensure that students can be successful in that valuable, valuable time that my faculty sit down with me. That's precious. And so how can I nudge them gently along the path of QM and open? We can go one step further than just ensuring we have measurable objectives and alignment. This is directly tied to the rubric with a lot of the things that you find in standard 4, right? In general standard 4. So I'm talking about instructional materials and how we can help achieve those stated objectives with the materials that we're putting in the course. What if we can have a conversation about the types of activities, right? That's a dangerous line for a designer to talk about, but it does talk about representing up-to-date theory, right? An open course with open materials can pivot faster than a mainstream publisher textbook because once it's printed, it's out of date, right? You've got a 6-month to 12-month window and then new stuff comes out. Using open might allow your faculty to have a more evergreen course that's always bringing in fresh and content that is current. And then what if we could help spread awareness of open pedagogy and reducing material costs, which talks about instructional materials in the course and completing learning activities and how they're clearly explained, right? So providing that narrative to students. I'm giving you these really great resources and articles that just were in the news the other day. This is why it relates to the objectives of our class. So we can talk about all of these things. The traditional model of course design is what we've been doing forever, right? Faculty member X has an idea for a course. The department identifies a need. They come up with some content, they find a textbook, and the course gets delivered, whatever modality that might happen to be. So maybe there's a different way of thinking about this. If we think about how we assemble our team to support that faculty member, right? It doesn't have to be them by themselves iterating on a course. You might not have the role of instructional designer at your particular institution, and that's okay. There might be some other people that we can tap to help with this. Here's what I mean. maybe a new model or better model of course design might be this. It might be an instructional designer. You might have someone on campus that is really knowledgeable about copyright. That might be a faculty member. Maybe there's a stipend we can give them to ask them copyright questions. I've got 6 subject matter librarians on my campus that handle kind of, one is assigned to each college, and they're constantly curating content and providing that out to the faculty members just so they're aware that new stuff that exists in our catalog. We have a multimedia producer in our department that handles capturing of lectures, how to do high-end production, those kind of things. Most of our institutions have an office of accessibility. They certainly can assist with assisting the faculty member. And of course, we have a collections librarian that actually takes care of the purchasing of materials. And if you have a library at your institution, there is someone in charge of buying the stuff. So as a part of this new model for course design, right, leveraging this team, this is where I introduce the conversation about quality matters, because we're already talking about the course and we're already going through an alignment map. And what I'm saying is, here's some really cool resources. You tell me as the subject matter expert, are these any good? I don't know. I know about instructional design and photography. And unless it's those 2 things, I can tell you all day what good instructional design books there are out there, photography books. But unless it's those 2 things, I'm not qualified to tell you what resources you need in your course, but I can point you in the right direction. So why open? Why are we even talking about open? I'm sure you've heard that of Creative Commons. If you haven't, just a quick recap. Open just means free plus permissions. It gives faculty members the control to do all of these things: copy, share, edit, mix, keep, use, whatever it happens to be. And Creative Commons is a license that sits on top of that. This presentation, I want you to rip it apart, put it back together. It's all CC BY, meaning all you have to do is say where you got it from, and it's yours, my gift to you. Okay, so why open? Well, it removes financial barriers for all students. It facilitates the free exchange of knowledge. It gives more control to faculty because you can choose just components of open resources and adopt those for your class. It can be used to innovate with pedagogy, right? I can find things that exist that can be modified, bring that into my course, and put the students in the driver's seat. It's certainly scalable, right? If there's no additional cost for my course materials, I'm infinitely scalable, right? Using something that's open. But specifically, I also want to point out something that you can use in your arsenal, and that's the concept of not just OER, but open textbooks specifically. In the chat, why do you think an open textbook might make more sense to a faculty member than just a random artifact of OER? I'm curious. Shout them out. A lot of good comments in the chat right now. I love Maryam saying, I felt more in charge when I adopted OER. Absolutely. Back in the day, we bought several textbooks for one class. Absolutely, Cynthia. It's a cohesive volume of knowledge geared toward the course topic, easy to use and free. Absolutely, Bethany. Gold star gamified. You absolutely are right. Conrad, closing the equity gap. Thank you. You're right. It hits a major point, right? We've been talking the whole time about textbook costs, but faculty understand textbooks to Bethany's point, right? It's a volume of knowledge. And because we've used textbooks forever, it's easy for me to see the organization. I can wrap my mind around a table of contents, and I can easily align those things to the objectives that I have in the class. Faculty know how to adopt textbooks, so going one for one is not as heavy a lift as you might think. And faculty effort versus the alternatives of having to go and find all these OER pieces is really at a minimum, whereas a complete body of knowledge within an open textbook, and I'll show you where to find a really great comprehensive referatory for textbooks here in a little bit. So absolutely, I think open textbooks can help get the conversation started at your institution when you're thinking about redesigning courses. How else can open textbooks and OER improve student success? Let me give you some examples. So using an open textbook gives you the ability to do content customization. So this is an example of an OpenStax textbook on collaborative statistics. And what they found was that the original open textbook was reliant upon R, the statistical tool. So think about if you're using R at your institution or Minitab or SPSS, that can be expensive, right? And a lot of students won't have that. So what these faculty members did is they got together and said, I bet we could teach statistics using Microsoft Excel, which is just something that most universities license for their students to be able to purchase for a nominal fee, or it's just included with your Microsoft Office implementation. And they were able to rework all of the examples using the formulas that you can find in software that students most likely already had, rather than having to go out and purchase a really expensive statistical suite. So that's and you were free to do that without fear of retribution from the original author because it was CC BY licensed. Okay, content contextualization, right? Sociology, if you look at the sociology textbook, which is now it's in its second edition on the OpenStax website, talks about sociology, but from the American perspective. Sociology exists in every country in the world, but everything is very US or European leaning. So this is an example of a derivative of this book where BC Open Campus wrote it from the Canadian perspective because they have different social issues that they have to deal with. And sociology looks a little bit different in that context, right? So that's an important thing to notice. Again, you can adapt these things and replace the examples. Another example of contextualization. Did you know that most textbooks that talk about astronomy are written from the Northern Hemisphere perspective? I didn't know that. And that's because a lot of the people that write these books are in North America and in Europe. So what Open Textbooks for Africa did is they took some open textbook astronomy texts and they went through and redesigned all of the examples of what to see in the night sky, but from the Southern Hemisphere's perspective, right? Because if I can't see the Southern Cross in the sky in the textbook, I have no idea how to relate to the material, right? So that's super important to address. And again, Creative Commons and open licensing allows for this. Let's talk about open pedagogy, right? There's a really great network that you should check out. Rajiv Jangiani from BC Open Campus co-runs this site. And he has a ton of really great examples from the open pedagogy notebook, a network, and talked about crowdsourcing the questions for your exams to the class. My small class of 35 students wrote 1,400 questions in the span of 10 weeks. Think about that old adage of the best way to learn something is to teach it to someone else. I remember at Bowling Green, I had a business law professor that crowdsourced all of the final exam questions and said, your job is to play a little competition. We'll divide the class in half. This half of the class is going to write questions that the other half of the class has to answer. And of course, us being competitive, using a little bit of game theory there, wanted to write really rigorous legal questions, but it got us to read the book and actually thumb through the content. So think about what it might mean for the students to help write and author the assessments. What do the students think is important to know about that topic? That gives them a lot of agency. Opportunities for innovative pedagogy. David Wiley took with his class, took a really cool project management book that was written for business majors and completely flipped it around. It's pmforid.org. If you ever want to check it out, I've read it. It's actually really good. But all of the examples were from a business context, and he and his students over the course of a few semesters rewrote the examples for instructional designers. This is a goldmine of information, right? Anybody who hasn't taken a professional development course for project management in the field of instructional design, this might be a go-to resource. This might be something that we read in maybe the QMIDA book club that we're talking about maybe at 4 o'clock today. Hint, hint, plug, plug. Okay, maybe there are ways that you can have your students actually collaborate on the syllabus. What if we've got our standard learning objectives here, but you're allowing the students to choose their own goals in the course? Think about how powerful that concept can be. Here's the general what we need to accomplish because my accrediting body says these are the things that this type of major needs to know. But where is your ability to address that curiosity from your students? I want to know about A, B, C, X, Y, and Z. Maybe those can be goals, and I might adapt my content using some open resources because it doesn't cost me anything other than time. And I can pivot and help add on to those particular areas. I would feel that QM is flexible enough, right, as long as we have our objectives in place to be able to certainly add those goals, and those goals can change from term to term. Absolutely. Maybe non-majors, non-major science students. This is an example from Roger Williams University in Bristol, Rhode Island, where they have the students go through and create websites on particular science topics that are being covered. And the idea is to create a body of knowledge from semester to semester. These topic websites, they might be using something like Wix.com or Squarespace, just the free versions. And they go through and hand those topics off to the next set of students to continue to add to that body of knowledge. I love that concept. We did something similar in my digital technology class that I taught in the spring 2020 infamous semester when I had to pivot to online. My students were in charge of creating website for themselves as a portfolio piece, but are sharing that resource with all of the other students to spark what they might do with their portfolio sites. So not necessarily open content, but the idea is that the students are generating things that following students are going to see, right? And those are some of the principles that are involved with open pedagogy. So again, the collaborative syllabus design, putting students at the center. Christina Katapodis put a really good quote together that said, democratically co-creating learning outcomes with students based on their goals for the class situates them at the center of your pedagogy. And I love that. I'll tweet that out a little bit later because yeah, it just gives them a stake in the game. You're helping drive what we're going to talk about this semester. And I think that's a very powerful concept to follow. Does this actually, oh, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, but just wanted to give you your 10-minute warning.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Paula. Does this actually work? Well, yeah, at the University of Georgia, we saw that the grades went up. This is a comparison of courses that adopted OER to non-OER within like the same area. 7.4% for non-Pell eligible students, and 12.3% grades went up for Pell eligible. Our most at-risk students that have the most adversity to face, those grades increased. Look at the DFW rates, all went down, right? Even across for all students across Pell or non-Pell eligible. So this does work. This does answer a major issue that we have in higher ed, the cost of materials. So at my institution, we decided to formalize this a little bit, and we created something called the Affordable Learning Initiative Grant. And we just took 5 classes. We had 16 proposals that came in, and we trained the faculty members on how to go through and adopt OER and things that they might consider. We gave them a loose rubric to follow, which I'll share here at the end in the resource site, that allowed them to look at open textbooks. And what I can tell you is that the projected savings were huge, right? Think about the cost of a $167 textbook across 1,800 students taking required general education biology class, $300,000 in potential savings. And remember, a faculty member doesn't just adopt a textbook for one semester. This compounds over and over and over again, semester after semester. All 5 of these courses have launched, and I'm excited to share what the feedback was. We asked for just $10,000. We gave faculty a $1,000 grant or a $2,500 grant. We didn't even spend all of it. We spent $9,500. I know I'm a bad grant recipient. I need to spend all the money that I'm given. But funding $10,000 worth of these grant projects, just 5 faculty teams got us $263,000 in savings in just 2 semesters. That's incredible. In total, we are currently, as of, I think, 2 weeks ago, at $629,000, anticipating over $1 million in savings by the time we end summer semester. We're usually saving about $300,000 now per term, just with faculty members who are now spreading this across their departments saying, this is working for me. Maybe you should consider it, right? Faculty speak loudest here. Here's some quotes from my students. It took some stress away from the money so I could focus more on the actual work. Coming from a student who was out of state, being able to take this course and not have to pay for the required text on top of many others, this has saved me a lot of money and stress. And I think this is probably the smartest thing UA has done since my first year here. I'm a single mother and adult learner. Many times I don't purchase the books due to expense and home commitments. Right, this is exactly what we're saying in the chat. It's nice to have my book on the computer where I can easily search the words or pages instead of flipping through a book and looking through an index. Certainly there are implications for accessibility here, right? Again, making a more equitable environment. Here's some of the additional feedback. The previous textbook for my management principles class was only $93. It wasn't a couple $100, but given this information, how likely would you have been to purchase the book? A lot of students are saying, well, extremely unlikely. I wouldn't even pay for a $93 book. But we also asked the question, did having the open textbooks contribute to your students' success in this course? Not a single student said no or not sure. They were all yes or maybe. And it just feels better to have free access to something rather than stress over the big price tags of books that you have to purchase. For my introduction to social welfare class, should we continue to utilize open textbooks or open resource for this course? Not a single student said probably not or definitely not, right? Much easier to follow online opposed to a handbook that I'd be required to purchase. For a history, humanities in the Western tradition course, again, same trend. This wasn't even a replacement with a textbook. This was just replacement with OER content. So that was also amazing. So you can see that just through aggregating our data across these 5 projects, did having an open textbook or open resource contribute to your academic success? Across all 5 of our projects, 70% said yes, 28% said maybe. They weren't necessarily sure. I had 1 no because that student said, I prefer printed textbooks, and that's totally fine. OpenStax allows you to actually print them and have it sent to you for free. Okay, So what I want to make a point here is that instructional designers, right, those that are in our support roles here, you need to know you have a lot more influence than you realize. You really do. You're already walking the faculty member through the concept of alignment. You're already taking the seat time and their precious time. They've already agreed to work with you. Being knowledgeable about open textbooks, about OER is hugely beneficial to you, because now you can start to just give them options to allow them to take a look and decide. You'd be surprised how many faculty members are going to step up to the plate with you and actually go with you on this open pedagogy and open textbook journey. So reminder, you as the designer, you're the inspiration. You are helping drive faculty members to do the best work that they possibly can. That's why I think designers rule the world. And certainly something that we tout in IDA. This was this past 6 months has been the time for us to shine. And for those of you that are IDs, for those of you that had to pivot quickly and dealt with the stress, kudos to all of you for everything that you do to make learning more equitable for your students. So I just want to thank all of you for taking the time to watch. Again, right here is the QM Learner Equity bit.ly site. If I just drag this over to the screen, some things I want to point out here in the last 5 minutes that I have. I gave you guys an example of what our grant actually looked like. Feel free to modify that language. It's just a document. It's essentially laying out the steps that we wanted our faculty to walk through. So there's different phases of the project of when we would give them money. We would go through, let me just scroll down a little bit here. So we had 4 different phases. There was the planning phase where you sit down with the design team and the librarians, that collection of people that we've assembled around them. There's a production phase, a quality assurance phase. And then of course we made it mandatory that they have to do reporting. So we had, we went to OpenCon Cleveland, which is the during Open Ed week that happens annually. And we had the faculty members share with other faculty how reasonable this was. So definitely let the faculties, your champions, shine through. The presentation is in here. And then of course, the master list of open resources. You guys will love this. These are all the research articles that I've started to cull through and provide to all of you with some descriptions. I'd like to ask all of you, if you know of a really great resource that you want to share here, add it to the list and give me 1 or 2 sentences why we should pay attention to it. Why is it cool? So we've got a ton of stuff that I just added like last night because I remembered that I should add them. What are some additional strategies for getting faculty to look at OER that you might consider or have considered at your particular campus? But I will share with you that there are a ton of great resources here. I'm also a trainer for the Open Textbook Network, which is just, if you Google Open Textbook Library or Open Textbook Network, it's a comprehensive repository that has over 800 textbooks that are free to use, free to adapt. Most of them are OpenCC by license, where you can just rip them apart and pull them back together, which has been really exciting for some of the faculty members. On the QM side of the house, also in this folder, I've given you some example alignment documents of how we work through the social welfare class and the history class. And you can see where we're pointing to individual artifacts and how you would build that into an alignment document. I was also really excited. I was like jumping for joy when Dr. Pollard talked about Z degrees. And I just so happen, if for those of you that didn't catch the keynote, remember a Z degree is a zero cost degree, meaning that the cost of materials has already either been taken care of or there just isn't any, because that program was designed to utilize open resources. And I've got a bunch of really great articles that might kickstart the conversation. I sent this entire list to my provost and they're like, okay, we're gonna talk more. For us at Akron, it makes sense because our mascot is the Zips. It's a little kangaroo and her name is Zippy. And so a Z degree kind of markets itself, right? So I just wanted to give you some of those great resources. Please feel free to share, ask me questions. You can find me on Twitter. You can certainly email me. I'm always happy to talk to the community about all of these things. I wanted to give you the gold mine of information. I see gold mine coming up. Thank you, Bethany. Thank you so much for your time. I'll pause here. We got a couple minutes left for any questions you might have. Check in the chat here. Thank you, Miriam, for resharing the link. It's just bit.ly / it is case sensitive, just to note. Make sure you put in the capital letters where appropriate. And Cynthia, you see, what about publishers and scholars? What is, little follow up on that. What was your particular question in that vein? I've got like a minute left to hopefully answer you.
Mr. Kaufman, I have one thing I didn't see.
Yeah.
I work for continuing education, and we use Skills Commons all the time because we're doing
Yes.
workforce training.
Yes.
And I've used a number of great programs that are grant funded that other community colleges have created that we're using in our classroom as simulations, specifically for medical transcription or medical software programs. So it's been really fantastic. We're using that a lot, and there isn't a lot of conversation about it because academic doesn't use it, but we are using it in continuing ed.
Gosh, I think Shannon, if you would be willing, please add that to the Google
course.
list. I don't think I had heard of that one, but I didn't even think of it. So that's really wonderful. Thank you.
Absolutely, of course.
And I've got 30 seconds. Cynthia was asking, where do they now get their funding? I actually have a whole open textbook network training that I can do for you that talks about funders. Everything from your individual state might have funding available for OER. I know the state of New York just did $8 million. Ohio just wrapped up a $1.5 million grant for the adoption of OER resources. So depending on the state, that might be an avenue for someone who is in the publishing or scholarly article area to be able to create open content and have it funded. Certainly Gates and Hewlett Foundation have also provided a ton of money. That was a lot of the seed money that went into OpenStax, who just announced a few weeks ago that they were going to double the size of their library, which is really, really exciting.
Thank you so much, Steve. This is a great presentation, and I really appreciate you being an OER champion, in general. So thank you all for coming. There'll be, if you haven't got it already, Beth sends out individual links to session surveys. So please do that. It's always nice to give some feedback to the presenters and the conference organizers. So I'm going to end the session because we have another workshop coming up right away in 10 minutes, and I want to give that facilitator a little time to set up. So thank you again, Steve. Thank you to everybody. And hopefully we can continue this conversation in Gatherly.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.